Given the chance to do anything I wanted, I chose to do something new, challenging, but also meaningful to me. I decided to do something that would give me a deeper understanding of the culture of Yogyakarta. Based on this, I chose the topic, the evolution of traditional Pais Ageng to the modified version, with a goal to show how traditions change over time as it is influenced by modernization. The establishment of the Yogyakarta Kingdom has founded a variety of symbols or attributes of high cultural value, one of which is makeup, wedding outfits, and also the wedding processions brought up from the aristocratic fashion and wedding etiquette from the Yogyakarta royal family. Human ingenuity was my area of interaction. I felt that this was the best choice for my project because I planned to learn how people came up with these traditions and how ancient Japanese wedding dresses changed in the course of time to look the way they are today. For my research, I went through a variety of internet sites, books, magazines, and also a face-to-face interview with an expert in this field. The most helpful sources were the books Tata Rias Pengantin Yogyakarta Traditional Pais Ageng, written by Mrs. Tino Rifki, Batik My Story by Mrs. Ani, and the interview I did with Mrs. Purwono. Here is a snippet of the interview I did.
Di keraton pusatnya itu lewat sana itu pusatnya. Tadinya itu bukan busana manten, maksudnya juga busana adat yang kemudian dijadikan patokan untuk membagikan pais. Nah, kalau zaman dulu manten itu hanya pais ageng itu hanya di keraton. Kalau di luar keraton itu tidak pais ageng, maksudnya bukan pais ageng itu ya tidak memakai apa produk dan segalanya.
This interview was done to ascertain the information I got from other sources. I met directly with Mrs. Purwono, who is a makeup artist working alongside Mrs. Tino Rifki. Mrs. Tino Rifki is the most famous Pais Ageng makeup artist. Unfortunately, I couldn't meet with her because it was a busy time for her working with the princess's wedding. Mrs. Purwono has been working in this field for about 60 years, and now she teaches in the Pais Ageng courses offered in Mrs. Tino Rifki's salon. From this interview and all the research that I've done, I learned that the key aspects of this Pais Ageng is the details in the makeup and accessories, such as the bracelets, necklaces, and headpieces, and that the modern versions of the wedding attire still need to follow some rules. Changing the looks too much with the attire will make it lose its name as a Pais Ageng. Therefore, I designed a kebaya. Although it does not resemble dodatan or kampoh, kebaya still has the traditional feel, and I will still use aspects from the traditional dodatan, such as the batik that I will use for the skirt. From all the research, I came up with these specifications. The student shows at least 3 different types of beads in his or her creation. For mine, I used the batangan, the mangkok, the pasir, and parel. The student experiments with at least 2 different materials for the wedding attire. For my wedding dress, I used brocade, tulle, and satin. The student makes use of 1 or more colors for the wedding attire. In my creation, I used light beige, gold, white, and silver. The student makes use of 1 of the types of batik in his or her creation. Mine was Jarit Sido Asih. The student experiments with different types of patterns for his or her creation. In my wedding dress, I used a flower pattern brocade. The student shows a variety of beading techniques in his or her creation. I've used a variety of puntirans and also semut ngerayap. Taking the sewing course. This is one of the first steps I had to do in order to move on in this project. With no knowledge or skill in sewing, I knew this project would be a challenge. In this course, I learned the most basic things such as cutting the fabric, creating a pattern, and sewing on zippers. I enjoyed designing because it was where I used my imagination to draw on what I wanted to make. This step was quite unpleasant. Choosing between so many colors, textures, and types of fabric and tulle was difficult for me. The smell of new fabric is pretty strong and easily gives me a headache. I went through a few shops until I found the fabric and tulle for my wedding dress. Shopping for beads were quite similar, as there was a wide variety of colors and shapes to choose from. Finally, I had to buy some crystals to embellish the wedding dress. The wedding dress has about 30 Swarovski crystals sewed onto it. After all the shopping is done, I can start making the wedding dress. The first step is to get the measurements. Here I am taking the measurements of the mannequin because I originally planned to put the wedding dress on display on the mannequin. The next step is to take the measurements and draw a pattern to guide me through cutting the fabric. This will be the next step. After cutting the fabric and tulle, I start sewing everything together. This gives me the basic layer of the wedding dress. To add more detail, I cut the flower patterns off the tulle I bought and embroider it onto another piece of cloth called organdi. To separate the flower patterns from the excess organdi cloth, I shoulder around the flowers to melt away the tulle and organdi. The next step is embroidering these flower pieces onto the basic layer. This process was challenging for me because I was not very good with the embroidery machine. All these steps I followed for the top, camisole, and the trail. I've designed this wedding dress to have the separate trail so it can be worn to other occasions other than the wedding. After all the sewing is done, all I need to do is beading. This was the most tiring and took the longest time. Finishing the beading process took about 7 months of continuous work. From this project, I have learned that customs and traditions change as people's mindsets start to change. We're used to getting things done faster and easier. This unfortunately results in people gradually forgetting or ignoring the story or the history behind these customs and traditions. Everything nowadays is based on stylish looks and designs. Take for example the Sisir Gunungan and the Mentul. The Sisir Gunungan is one of the many accessories that make up the Pais Ageng. The shape of the Sisir Gunungan symbolizes the greatness of God and the hopes for happy life for the couple. The philosophy is that the mountain is a high place, which represents the ambition of everyone to fulfill their highest aspirations. The mountain, containing the material wealth that is essential for humans, symbolizes prosperity. The mentul is an accessory shaped like a flower. To complete the Pais Ageng, 5 mentuls are needed. They symbolize the 5 human passions, which are affection, pleasure, desire, power, and purity. Traditionally, both of these accessories are placed facing backwards, in the sense so that people do not forget the history of their life before this marriage. As I said before, nowadays people are more focused on stylish looks. Today it's considered stylish to place the flowers and ornaments facing forward.